Well, that was a very interesting bit of music. I probably should have listened to that before I set it off. I saw the video and I thought that's quite a nice little countdown, nice graphic. Music-wise, that was very strange. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us here. I know that it's all been a bit confusing. It was Wednesdays, 8 till 10 all of last year. Then I moved to Tuesdays, 6 till 8 for the music shows. And here I am back live again on a Wednesday at 8 o'clock. But guess what? These are for the Cunning chats. Now, my next guest. We've been talking for a little while about making this happen, so I'm super, super excited to actually get this all kicking off. It's been active for over 3 decades, right? Has been a behind-the-scenes soldier, setting the gold standard in the early 90s, engineering for the likes of DJ Crystal, Trace, and many, many more. Worked with Lucky Spin, worked with DJ, worked with Impact, worked with FFRR, was released on Good Looking Tempo, Creative Source, and many more. And if that wasn't enough, was also part of a breakbeat trio called Breakneck. So it was with great pleasure to bring in my guest, Pete Parsons, aka Voyager. Pete, how you doing?
I'm all right, mate. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing
Cheers,
good,
mate. Cheers, mate.
There you go. Oh, I've got the wrong drink. I should have got myself a pint of gin and tonic to get me through the next bit.
Definitely, mate. Definitely. I like that music, mate. That little intro, mate. That was very kind of. Oh, it was very cool.
It was a bit too somber, really, wasn't it? I was listening to it.
It was a bit, yeah.
I should have checked this probably before I did. But there you go. I thought it looked quite nice. There you go.
Yeah, it was lovely.
So listen, mate, I really appreciate you taking some time to spend with us today to kind of go through your story. You know, I'm sure it is a phenomenal story, but I'd love to kind of get started, as I do with all the guests, is to, you know, was there a musical moment that you remember where you made that connection? You might have been 4, might have been 14, it might have been a song, might have been an event, you know, whatever it was. Do you remember like having that kind of first real connection to music?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I was a kid, when I was still in like primary school, so pre-teen, about like 9 or 10 or something like that, I remember that, I mean, music was always around. Like, Mum was always playing music, and it was, you know, there was a lot of music all the time, constantly. The radio was on, or there was always something going on, and we used to listen to the you know, the charts, the top 40, as most of us did back in the day when we were kids, you know, on a Sunday afternoon, and listen to all the music. And back then, we're talking about sort of, gosh, that was like mid-70s, something like that. So like really like back in the day. And I used to get some pots and pans and some spoons and stuff, and just be bashing and just be playing, you know, and you know, the drums was my first love, and I just thought, you know, and I could play, and I was keeping it in rhythm, and I was listening to it, and suddenly it became not just the song, but I was listening to what the drummer was doing. I was listening to what the vocals and all the parts, and it started to suddenly sort of split apart, and I just completely just fell in love with the whole thing. And from that point onwards, I was just, you know, it was just everything. It became completely consuming. And then up through school into secondary school, I was in a band, and I managed to borrow some drums off a mate, and then I got bought a drum kit for a birthday, and started a band at school. And at that time, that was sort of late 70s, so that was the whole sort of punk thing, and rock was a big thing, and so it was a kind of punk sort of slash kind of sort of rocky sort of thing that we were doing. And it just sort of took off from there, and we ended up doing, the very first gig that I ended up playing in was the band was called the Gonorrheas. So that's the Gonorrheas, man. So that says everything. But you've got to remember, like, punk bands then were called Discharge, and Exploited and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it had to be gnarly and nasty. It couldn't be, you know, anything fluffy and nice. So we played in the Barnet Arts and Crafts Centre, like first gig that we ever did, and it was all like, you know, massive Mohicans and leather jackets and all that kind of stuff. And I was just hooked, man. From then on, it was just like, okay, I'm in.
Do you know what?
And
My mum and dad might have gone to see you because they grew
really,
up round. Well, my mum grew up round Barnet, and they actually
right?
met at a pub in Barnet. That's when they first met. I'm going to ask him.
Oh, yeah. That would be crazy, man. Really, I mean, it's sort of like, and there's been some other really weird coincidences as I've kind of gone through of people that were around that sort of time that we bumped into, or they were skinheads and they were chasing me around East Barnet, like, and I was a headbanger with like denim jacket and all that kind of stuff. And I was just sold on it, man. And so, I was playing music in various sort of bands, and then in the '80s, I was in this kind of pop rock band when, sort of U2 and all those kind of guys and the Police and all that sort of stuff. They were huge, and I just wanted to be that. That was my life, and I had no other consideration that I was going to do anything else. Every job that I had was something that was going to pay the rent and to sort of get me by. But I was under no illusion that this is it. This is what I'm going to do.
This was your path, and
It
and
was.
during that time, obviously, you're playing drums, so you're kind of musically tuned, and you're
Mm,
kind of playing in a band, so you're getting that kind of performance bit.
mm,
Are you so from a kind of band perspective, you're understanding how a song is put together, you're writing songs,
mm,
you're involved in it, but
mm.
at that stage, are you listening and kind of being picked up by any electronic influences and kind
No,
of that? It was just pure out and out
no, no, no,
fanboy.
none of that at all. The electronic stuff, it was kind of no. I mean, the new romantic thing when all that kind of came in and everything started to get very electronic. It was kind of it was interesting, but it wasn't. It didn't have the same energy. It didn't have the same power, and especially with the new romantic thing, it was very visual. It was very image orientated, and for me, it was just more important. It was all about the music, and being in a band, you'd save up and you go to a studio, you record some demos, and that's where I really got into the whole technical side of things because when you're a drummer, you're the first person that does all the recordings. So we go in and we'd record about 3 or 4 tracks. That you'd set the drum kit up because that takes the most amount of time. Sit there. I'd watch the guy kind of miking everything up. I'd be sitting in the control room behind the board, seeing how it all gets patched in, and and just sort of hassling him. Oh, what does this do? What does that do? And just kind of watching what he's doing. And then so I was sitting there after I put my tracks down, and then just sit there and watch the guy and work with the all the other guys in the band. And I was just hooked on this, like, right, okay, this is it, because you're in control of everything. You can manipulate all the sounds, and learning how to use a big desk and to pull it all together and condense it all down to a stereo track and have it all sound great. It was just like, man, this is magic. This is amazing. Like,
So
loved
that
it.
so that's interesting. So, obviously, kind of through those bands, you've kind of got that exposure to that
Mm,
side of it, and there's been a clear kind
mm.
of path. So, at this point, are you thinking like, screw the band, this is what I want to do, or are you kind of happy riding those two and seeing how it goes?
Well, it was towards the end of the '80s. Where I was living, and the girlfriend I had at that time, she was a singer-songwriter, so she was always singing and playing guitar and everything. And we needed something to record on, and so we saved up our money and we bought a Porter studio, a Tascam Porter studio. Went all the way over to Ealing, over the other side of London, and bought one of these things, and took it home. And I thought that this is it, man. This is like
The
a Porter
future.
studio. Yeah, I've got my own studio. You record on a cassette deck, 4 tracks, and you continually bounce everything down to free up all your tracks and everything. And so that's where I kind of got into the whole recording of it. And then I borrowed a D50, Roland D50, which is just an awesome synth anyway. I borrowed that from mate. And then we had another an HR16, an Alesis HR16, and I think an Alesis, sequencer. So I was kind of messing around, putting the drum parts together, and the bass track, and then recording that onto the Porter studio. And then she would play a guitar, and then record that, and then bounce those two together onto a stereo track, and then she'd do the singing, and then do some backing vocals, and then we kind of do that. So it was like, okay, right, this is how it all works, and just having, you beg, borrow, from all your mates and whatever to get the thing done. And then I had a couple of other friends who had their own home studios that was running C-Lab before C-Lab became the Mac software. I can't remember what it's called now, but anyway, but they had that. And so I used to go around and sit there and watch him do his stuff. He was doing all this kind of really deep, melodic-y kind of new agey kind of stuff. But I was sitting there watching it, and it was all numerical, you know. So you recorded something, and you put a little 8 in there, and then another box you put like the amount of times you wanted that copied. So visually, it was really difficult to kind of understand it, and you had all kind of MIDI effects and bits and pieces, and he had some other stuff, external stuff that he was running through it. But I thought, okay, yeah, this is me. This is where it's going. And they were using at that time in the late 80s. They were going up to this studio called Monroe, which is up in Barnet, which originally used to be up in Barnet, High Barnet.
Famous Monroe Studios.
Yeah, the famous Monroe Studios, man, owned by these couple of guys, Hank and Roger, who are like amazing guys. And I used to go up there a couple of times and just sit there. And the studio at that time, it was on 3 floors. And they had the 24 track in the first floor. And then you go up a flight of stairs, and then they had a huge, great big room that could have a band in there. And then on the top floor, they had a loft with another little sort of production studio. And there were samplers, there were keyboards, there were, like 8-track open reel things and a mixing desk. I was like, man, this is, I have to work here. And I said to Hank, man, you know what, if like, please give me a job. Like, well, I'll do anything, whatever you want. I'll make the tea. Like, it doesn't matter. I like, whatever. And there was a guy there who was engineering in the main studio, the 24 track. That fortunately for me, he's like the Christmas of 89 going into 90. He said, okay, I'm going traveling, or I'm going to go and do something else. So a spot opened up, and Hank said, listen, if you want the job, it's there. There's no money for the first like year or so.
To the music industry.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And it's been the same ever since for 30 odd, for 30 odd years. It's not a pot to piss in, man. But you do it because it's like you're just called to it, man. It's a calling. It's just there. So that was it. I got a foot in the door, hassled him, like literally phoned him every day and bugged the hell out of him until he said, yeah, okay. All right, the job's yours. And I handed in my notice at the end of 89 at this carpentry and joinery firm that I was working at down in West Hampstead. And my girlfriend at the time wasn't particularly happy about it, because then that meant I couldn't like pay the rent or do anything. But I was like, babe, like what can I do?
Yeah,
I've got to do it.
Well, you could go and get a job that pays, Pete. That's what you could do.
I could have done, but
you wouldn't have been here now. And I tell you what,
no, there you go.
The scene wouldn't have been what it is today either. So I think we're all grateful for her sacrifice and your sacrifice on that one, for sure.
Yeah, and so that was, I spent the first sort of 6 or so months just sitting in the main studio. Because it was a production studio, not just a basic recording studio. So yeah, you would have bands and various people would come in. So you would have constantly, there would be 3 floors of music. You walk through the door and you just had this sort of cacophony of sounds going on. There'd be a rock band down there. There'd be somebody doing some kind of hip house or something, some weird kind of stuff and then at the top there'd be a couple of people there. We used to work with Eric Dial, the guy from Race, from Break for Love.
Yeah, wow.
He was one of the main clients up there. So he was doing all kinds of writing and stuff, and I was kind of lucky enough to hang out with him for a bit and see how he was putting some stuff together. And we had the 909 in there, and we had the S950, we had the M1 and a Roland U220 or 110, I can't remember what it was, and then an open reel thing. So and an Atari 1040, of course, the standard. And at that time it was still Pro 24, which was a little bit better than the C-Lab software because it was a bit more visual. And then as soon as they brought out Cubase 1, it was like, all right, that's it, man.
Game over.
You see your blocks go, literally game over. It was brilliant. And that was that. And then I kind of cut my teeth over there with those guys on so many different varieties of music and personalities and people, and like I say, working with Eric, and then Seduction came in, and John, and he was like, he came in, he just wanted someone to engineer some stuff. He had some. He came in with all his vinyl and we stuck it all in a sampler, and he was like, "Yeah, we're going to do this and I'll do that and do that." I was like, "Yeah, okay, I could." So I was strictly just doing all the technical side of it, and then he was, playing everything, and I was like, "Man, this is mental. This is like absolutely crazy."
So would this have been was it the first release he had was called Seduction, right? That was one of his very early ones.
It could have been, and I mean that's like, let me see, that's probably because the studio stayed in Barnet, excuse me, up until about the end of 1990, and we moved out to Holloway Road in Islington, and I think he was doing quite a lot of stuff. I'd see him pretty much most weeks, and it was just, it was totally new. It was completely different. I'd had all this stuff of playing guitars and playing drums, and I remember when I came for the chat for Hank to bring me into the studio, he's like, "Listen, what did you know about electronic music?" And I was like, "No, I haven't got a clue." I listened to AC/DC and Genesis and Rush and all that kind of stuff. He's like, "Well, okay, right, here's a cassette. Take this time over the weekend and listen to this, because this is the kind of stuff you're going to be doing." I was like, "Okay, great, no worries." And that was like really my first sort of proper exposure to electronic music.
I'm going to ask you now, right? What was that tape?
Okay, you know what? I can't remember, man. It was probably some hip house,
right?
Twin Hype, maybe something like that, or because they was doing some early hip hop stuff and. A lot of hip, Eric at that time was doing like Bleep House and that kind of stuff, and I was like, "Okay, what is this?" It's kind of had that four to the floor thing, but was very bleepy and kind of proto ravey sort of sounds, and I guess that kind of came out of the whole kind of Detroit thing. He was influenced in, so he was kind of starting to blend stuff, and then a lot of the early kind of rave stuff was starting to emerge, and people were being a lot more experimental with stabs and samples and playing things out of key and all that kind of stuff. So it was amazing.
Do you remember? So obviously at this point you kind of listened to this tape, so you were kind of getting a bit of a flavour for what it was all about.
Yeah.
When did you kind of first actually go to a night and think, right, I've kind of got experience in its environment to see what it's all about?
I've got to be honest with you, man. I didn't go out partying because I didn't have any money. I couldn't pay to go in there. I didn't know anybody to get me on the door or even buy a drink, and I was still trying to keep my relationship together. So there was no way I could go and work for like 8 hours, come home with no money, and go, "Babe, listen, I'm just going to go down, wherever it was." No. So I was trying to balance everything, and it wasn't really until kind of, I guess, really sort of 93, 94 when it was Speed at Milk.
Right.
That was when I was really started to start going out and experiencing and feeling it and being out and being out amongst it.
And that must have been pretty crazy for you if you were kind of involved in a sort of a number of tracks from the sort of early 90s. What was that like when you actually heard the first track that you'd been involved in, like in a club? Do you remember it?
Yeah, I mean that was just golden, man. Like to hear, Danny Buckham or Fabio like drop some of those tunes, and just to see the reaction from everybody and to hear it in a club environment and to feel it, it was that's the payback, man. That really is the payoff. That you can't beat that. Like hear your own creation and seeing everybody, and nobody knows that it was you. It's just like it's an honest kind of reaction to what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I've heard that a few times, and you never get that never gets old, man. Never. That makes you feel like really proud that despite all the stuff that's going on in the background and relationships going down the drain, and you're living in a bedsit somewhere, and you're eating, you know, like Fingers ready-made meals at 3 in the morning. You know, it's like, okay, all right, that is all worthwhile.
I kind of remember just drinking like one Nutriment, thinking like, you know, I can afford one of those. That's got all the vitamins in it. Apparently, I can't swallow any food. I'll
Yeah.
just drink one of those things.
Mate, we went through a bit of a thing at the studio. We were just banging those nutriments, like the vanilla one or the chocolate one.
Yeah.
Because it had nothing in your stomach, so this thing just went straight into you, and you got a real, like, I felt really weird after every time that I drank one of those. You know, you kind of get all spacey and I don't know what's going on, and you just got this massive amount of vitamins and sugar just like pumped into your system, and it was okay. Like, let's just take a couple of minutes, man. I just need to get my head back together. And, but yeah, that was a lifesaver, Nutriment.
Yeah,
Man.
there you go.
Definitely.
So I'd like to talk a little bit more about Seduction. So you started working with him. Sort of that relationship evolved, right? And you were getting involved with Impact. Tell us a little bit more about those that path.
Well, like John came in, and you know, I was really sort of taking care of the all the technical stuff for John. John was very, you know, he had a clear vision, you know, in his head of exactly what it wanted to sound like and exactly how everything was going to come together. And we would put something together in one session, so like a 6-hour session or something. And we do all the sampling. The first sort of couple of hours was just getting everything into the sampler, and then he just kind of like put the brakes and put everything together. And I knew I could already hear the track was evolving, you know, and that was something that that was always there when people came in and they had a bunch of records, and as the things were going into the sampler, I was going, this break's going to sound wicked. Right, I'm going to chop this up, put it here, and there'd be a pad and there'd be a vocal, and it'd be like, right, yeah, I already know what the track's going to sound like. And John was very much like that. And at that time as well, Paul Focus, DJ Focus, he started coming in as well, because he was a part of this kind of group of guys that wanted to kind of get onto this, you know, this kind of early Prodigy kind of thing where there was a lot of kind of dancing going on. It was a big kind of act as well as the music, and he was a sort of one part of that. And I remember like him coming into the studio, and he said, "Listen, mate, I went out to some rave on the weekend. I can't remember what it was." And he said, "It is just absolutely mental. It's absolutely bonkers. He said, we've got to make some music that is going to work in this kind of environment." I was like, "Yeah, mate, I'm all over it." So, you know, we come in we put some stuff together, and some of the early stuff, I don't think it ever quite saw the light of day, or it was more tuned to the kind of project that he was already involved with. So he didn't want to kind of go, you know, off on his own just at that moment, because he was sort of tied to that, and they had a little bit of money behind it as well. So he had to kind of, and they were all his mates as well. So he couldn't just go, you know, like I'm off, mate. So, and that kind of eventually that ran its course. And then Paul was doing his thing, and I was working with Seduction, and then the studio moved at the end of 1990 to the Holloway Road place. And I remember that over the Christmas period, we moved everything, and I was in the big studio, which was right at the back of the building, and we put this huge, great big. There were some sliding glass doors that used to be on a car showroom that they kind of got for like 50 quid each or something, and those were with the glass windows that separated, you know, the control room from the live room.
Right.
And we put that in, and we put the desk in, and we had these huge, great big custom-built tannoy monitors that were like in the wall, and then we had no other furniture, like nothing. So all the outboard stuff was all piled on milk crates and all this kind of stuff. And John was like probably pretty much the first client that we had in there, and he came in, and that was the mix down for the what was his big track in '91.
Oh, there was You and Me, Hardcore Heaven.
Yeah, Hardcore Heaven.
Yeah.
That was Hardcore Heaven and You and Me. That was the single that we did, you know, with stuff on milk crates and all that kind of stuff. And that was the first mix down we had in there. And I remember I was pumping that thing, man, because those speakers were insanely loud. A huge, great big bass, you know, like 18-inch cones or whatever it was, and they were monster. And we just smashed it in that studio, man. And I remember like doing that mix down with him, and that was just crazy. Like just seeing all this stuff around us. I knew it was a good tune, but didn't know that it was then going to go on. He got the deal off of that, the FFRR thing,
right?
And that came out, and then I started hearing that on the radio, and then I started hearing a few more things that I'd done on the radio as well, and I was like, oh, okay, all right, this is good. And then it charted, didn't it? I think it got like top 5 or something, Hardcore Heaven.
Yeah, I'm not sure position, but yeah, I'm pretty sure it did. I mean,
it got high up the charts, man, and that was like, wow, okay, this is awesome. And then you know, it just kind of gained momentum because John was really, you know, he was coming into the studio a lot, and then of course he was playing out, and he knew lots of people, and he's saying, you know, come to Monroe, and you know, come work with Pete, and they, you know, the sound of what I was putting it together, it was all sort of well balanced and all that kind of stuff, and you could tell that it come out of a big studio. And not out of you know, of a bedroom or a smaller setup, so it had that kind of big, sort of full sound. And you know, of the experience that I'd had of mixing live bands and all that kind of stuff is getting everything separated, so you could hear everything, and a lot of trial and error with EQing and compression, which is a real art to it, because it's difficult to begin with, because a lot of people automatically just like turn the treble up and like make the bass really bassy, and then you end up with this kind of, you know, sort of smile on a frequency chart. You've got like 50 hertz is just like, it's just banging up against the top, and then it's just, you've got so much tops on it, it's just horrific, and then there's nothing in the middle. So, you know, like I just kind of learned that it's like, you know, you have to be really kind of careful with it, and if something sounds good, then just leave it. Like, you don't have to constantly like really just, you know, grind the sound up, you know, especially when you're dealing with parametrics. You know, you can really mangle something up and just destroy it completely. Right. So I kind of learned through a lot of that process, especially with electronic stuff, that sometimes it's best to, it's just to kind of leave things as they are and mix the track literally as it's being put together. Because the worst thing, I still do it now, that, you know, if you're writing something, then you're hearing it, you're creating it, you're creating the sound, and you're kind of doing little tweaks as it goes. And most of the time, you know, the finished kind of demo, if you like, that where you've mapped out the arrangement, you've got all your parts in there, and you're kind of listening to it, and it's going, yeah, okay, yeah, that's I'm happy with that now. And then, you know, it used to be, it's like, right, okay, let's do the mix down and pull the whole thing down and then start all over again. It's like, no, like just no, because that you just destroy it. Yeah, it's ready. That's it. You spent eight hours or something tweaking it and then getting it ready. It's like, right, let's put that to that, and then if there's anything else, right, let's have a little fiddle, and just do that. And you know, my thing was like, listen, guys, like, don't touch the desk. Right, like, and I'd mix everything, so all the faders were at 0, and just do everything with the little trims at the top of each channel, and just with the EQ, because, you know, if you're boosting particular frequencies, then obviously you're making it louder, so you have to like drop the trim and pull it back down so it's in 0. So I try and get everything level, so I knew that if I went, all right, I'm just going to go and make a cup of tea, I'll be back in a minute, and come back, and all the faders were like, you know, all over the place. I was like, mate, like, oi, what did I tell you?
I mean, do you know, it's amazing, right? And I wanted to ask you about, you know, how you're kind of refining your craft and building it up, you know, especially back then, right? You know, there were no YouTube videos, there were no online resources, you know, that information was actually quite scarce and held by, you know, select people around there. You know, what was your kind of approach to, you know, evolving you as like an engineer and working with those tracks?
Well, a lot of the information that we got was coming from the music mags, you know, Sound on Sound was the main one. And I can't remember any other music mags. There were probably definitely, you know, some others that were going on there, electronic musician or whatever it was called. But definitely Sound on Sound. That Sound on Sound was the Bible. You'd have interviews with different producers and all that kind of stuff, and you pick up little tips about this and how, you know, to sit the like where to place the reverbs and the delays, and actually what compression, like what actually is compression, like, because a lot of the time I just didn't really understand it. And I've got to be honest with you, for a long time I didn't put compression on anything. Like we had in the outboard rack, we had about, I think it was 8 maybe SSL or Neve compressor channels that I could have used. That I think, you know, if we were doing vocals, then Roger, one of the other guys there, said, listen, you know, you need to put compression on the vocals, because vocals is so, you know, dynamic all over the place. You can't not put it on, otherwise the vocalist is going to be backwards and forwards and doing all this crazy mic control. So you need to just to kind of level that off. But what does that mean? You know, the difference between the threshold and the this and the attack and the delay and all this kind of stuff. So, you know, I was a little bit reluctant, because I was quite happy, like how I was doing it, like just nulling everything at 0 and just doing everything by ear, and just balancing all the parts and all the sounds and all the different colors that were there to make this kind of complete picture. And that, and when I started using compression, it kind of I didn't quite get it right, and a couple of things. It's easy to kind of mangle sounds and particularly drums and other things. You just crank it up to, you know, and just kind of experiment and play with it. So on a lot of those things, and a lot of tracks I made, you know, back in those early 90s things, I had no compression at all. There was nothing there. It just sounded good. So it's all right. Let's go with that.
Do you know what? Like with DJing back in that era, where really all you had was 2 turntables and a very basic mixer that didn't have even a gain, let alone like any EQ or anything. It was really just like, you know, crossfader, and that was it. You know, the same is to be said with like kind of learning to engineer and produce tracks. Like, you know, I've said this before, but you know, I remember buying an Atari ST, I think in like 94, 95. Sat in my bedroom for 6 months, didn't know anyone, couldn't get a copy of Cubase, so ended up just selling it back to the to the thrift shop that I bought it from for like half the price, because you know, getting that information, you know, was one thing, but then the perseverance and energy and effort putting into that to then kind of learn and understand it and be good at it was next level, mate. So you know, hats off to you for, you know, you clearly put the hours in.
Well, cheers, mate. Yeah, I mean, it was literally trial by error. You know, like I had before the studio moved to Holloway Road, and it was probably a session. In fact, I remember we did. We were doing a cover of "I Can't Wait." There was someone that came in and wanted to do like a dance remake or a dance version of that. And I was going to be engineering and programming the session, and we just got Cubase 1, and Roger came in and said, right, this is what you do. So you hook in the midis here, and you put the midis in there, and you've got to go MIDI through, go into the sampler, and do this, that, and I'm like, right, okay. And the client is sitting there, like, so he's giving me like a sort of, you know, engineering 101, but the guy's there, the clock's ticking. I'm like, right, okay, all right. And this is how you sample into the Akai. You put the input in there, you hit out, and you do that, and then you move the thing together, get it right up to the bass drum, and then do that, and you put it on the keys, MIDI channels. I'm like, right, okay, yeah. And literally, and we managed to get through it, because the guy that I was working with, like, he was a really nice fella. And he'd used the studio before. He was a young guy. So he was just as interested in putting this thing together as I was, and we just kind of, you know, got it together. And he was, you know, we had to replay the whole parts, the bass line, and we had a funky drummer thing going on, and some stabs, and then he was going to have some girls come in and redo the vocals. And so we ended up just putting the instrumental bit together in one hit, and that was really cool. So I was like, okay, like this. Once you get the hang of it, it's just repetition. You know, you're you're copying blocks across. Okay, let's cut that and let's move that out, take that out. All right, let's listen to the beginning. So there's a lot of times you just listen to the whole thing and obsessing about like an 8-bar loop or a 4-bar thing. It's like, does that sound right? Could we do something a bit better with that? So once you get past the technical side of it, it unleashes the creativity, because there's nothing more of a buzzkill than technical drama, or something doesn't work, or you can't get some, or when you're trying to loop a break, it's not looping properly and you don't know why, or the guy you're sitting next to doesn't have a clue, like, well, I don't know, like, I'm trying to do it. So I kind of got on top of that whole thing like pretty quickly. So people would come in and they book 6-8 hour session, and by the end of it we could get something done, and it's like guaranteed, like, I can do this for you, it's not a problem. It's like, now it's on you, like, what you want and how you want to do it, because I can work the sampler, get all that in there, get the program, get Cubase running for you. So there we go. And but the 1040 was a beast. Was like, I had so much drama with those 1040s. They were brilliant when they were working, but when they just kind of froze and you were like, no, you just spent like an hour like putting the thing together, but you didn't save it.
They almost come with a post-it note built into the monitor just saying save every 5 minutes.
Yeah, literally, you do the play note save, do something save, do something save. So yeah, there was lots of like, all right, let's do this again.
Yeah. It reminds me, actually, while we were talking about compression, Pete Cannon dropped a message saying, asking you a question. He says, can you ask him what the old group compressor was he had at the studio in Holloway, and about the setup in general? We talked about the setup in general, but I'm pretty sure Pete's asked this because that's next on his shopping list.
Yeah. And I've been asked this question before, and we did with the crystal stuff, that really early crystal stuff, Drop Ecstasy, I think it was, and the thing that we did with Justin Slipmaster J, the first Lucky Spin releases, I think, were done up in Barnet. But then when we went to the Holloway Road one, those first sessions that I did with Dan, we was down in the 16-track studio downstairs in the basement, and we only had a couple of a couple of bits down. We had the sampler, and we had like a 49 key keyboard, and there was a delay unit, I think, and maybe a reverb, and then this compressor. And it was just a 1U compressor. For the life of me, there's no way I can remember what it was called. But
maybe it's one of the ones. They were like 1U racks, weren't they?
Yeah, it was. It might have been. It was. Goodness knows. But on those early, those tracks.
Which sounds like you didn't use them anyway. So
no,
Pete, that's your answer, Pete. Just don't use them.
It's your answer. Like, yeah. But on Meditation and Warp Drive, we just we were just messing around, and you split everything out of the 8 outputs out the back of the Akai and put that into the board, and just kind of messing, and it's like, okay, and that was the time again, like I was saying, it was just like an experiment. Okay, let's put it through the compressor and let's just see. And then just kind of like, okay, let's get extreme, like, and whack up the threshold and put the aim in through it. And it was like, oh, hang on a second. And you got this like just smashing up against the ceiling, that just brought all of the background noise from that amen break, like brought it right up, and you heard all the cymbals, the ride cymbal, and the snare was really banging, and you had all this background noise going on, and it's like, Dan was just like freaking out. It's like, that's it. That's it. It's like, don't touch it. I was like, all right.
I know that. I know what happens when someone says, don't touch it. I'm well versed in that. Don't worry.
Just step off, man. And we just got that sound just completely by accident, and there was no like, if we do it, like, if we put the thread, it's like, no, man. Like, I couldn't tell you. So unfortunately, it was one of those accidental things, you just piss around with something and something happens.
Yeah.
So it's just just whack up the threshold. It could be any compressor. It wasn't an AMEC or an SSL or an Eventide or something, really high level. because the studio didn't really have that much money then, so it was just something cheap that Hank had bought that was just there, just so that we did have something where we recorded vocals that we just used to the extreme. You know?
Yeah, nice. All right. Well, so speaking of Crystal, obviously he was always going to come up in this conversation. I'd like to just rewind it back a little bit. Do you remember the first time you met Dan and you guys got together? Tell me about that.
He was so this was back in Barnet still, so 1990. He was the DJ, scratch DJ in a British hip hop crew called Brotherhood, and I think that they had maybe come to the studio once before, maybe to come and do some pre-production in the big room upstairs, just to get all the samples together, and then they came in maybe to do the vocals, or I think because Aston had his studio, Aston Harvey.
Yeah.
So they were all from North London. They were all mates. They'd all been together, been to school together and hung out together. So I think they did the original pre-production over at Aston's place, and then came to us to do the final mix down, because it's a big studio. Dan was there, and a few of the other original members, Jay and Lowell, and the producer at the time, I can't remember his name, Underdog, his name was, and they came in, and Dan was there, and he was this crazy guy, man. He was just completely. They were all, because they were so tight, they were such good mates. There was loads of banter going on. They were taking the piss out of each other, and all kinds of crazy ass stories and all kinds of stuff like that. And I thought, you guys are like, you
can come again.
You can definitely come again. It's so much fun. And but when he got behind the decks and the cuts and scratches and everything that he was doing was like, damn, man, this guy really knows what he's doing. And all those guys, had really studied it, and they were completely into it, and they were like 100% into doing what they were doing, and they really, really knew like what they wanted and what they wanted to sound like, and what Lowell Shylock was kind of what he was talking about, and the bars that he was putting down, and just the vibe, and so that was great. And Dan, I remember hearing some stories about that maybe he was going out, he was going to Astoria, and was kind of getting involved in that whole kind of thing. And I think that was definitely the trigger for him, or the spark, I think, was the original thing for him, that he was going out and hearing all these early days, all this early rave kind of stuff. And then he would come back on his own, and because he was friends with Justin, of course, a similar part of London. And they were like totally on the same vibe, and that's probably who was going out with, and just being in the middle of the dance floor at Astoria in those early days, that early kind of music that was just about being put together. It was you listen to some of those early stuff, it was so ropey. It was so amazing. Like, but it was incredible. Like you could go sit in your mate's bedroom if they had a sample, or go to the studio, fling something together, and like go and get a dub cut, and get it played, and it didn't matter. There was no production. Like, is that a snare? Is that the right snare? I don't know. Like, let's listen to about another 1,500 or so. None of that stuff. It was the energy. It was just pure energy, and that was again with Paul Focus, with Dan, with Justin, with John as well. Seduction is they were living it. They would go out on the weekends. John was playing. He'd come, he'd be there, and he'd go, right, I know exactly what I've got to do. I know exactly the kind of tune. I've got the samples. I've got this, and that was the key to the essence to the whole thing. Is like, dance music is dance music, and you've got to go out and you've got to be in it. You've got to feel it, and you've got to feel that the energy that you get off of everybody. You've got to hear it on a big system and know how it works, and feel how it works, and bring that into the studio and put that into the music. And I was the kind of the person between their ideas and their memories and the feelings that they had of being in that environment. I was that kind of sort of conduit, that person that was the middleman between the technology and the emotion and the energy of what I was doing. So it was lucky that I was able to do that and do it really, really quickly. And
you would have pen and paper, right?
Yeah,
They
yeah.
were, they were the part of the authors, and you were getting it down, mate. I mean,
Yeah,
it's just,
yeah.
you know, I'm going to bring in a question from Adamski, who's one of the regulars listeners, and he says, Pete, how on earth did you find the time to engineer so many tracks that were bangers? Listening back, there was no sense of fatigue in your productions.
Well, thanks for the question, man, and thanks. Yeah, that sense that it was a kind of, you know, I sort of got to a quality, a level that it was just, it became instinctual. You know, I knew what to do, and again, it was that I had a method, you know, of making sure that the desk was as it was. I already knew just by listening to the individual samples that I was putting in there. It's like, right, okay, I know what this is going to do. I know how this is going to work together. Okay, if I know what the break's going to do, I know that the edits and everything that I've got to do in order to get it kind of edited and rolling and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, in those early days, 91, 92, 93, it was just a steady stream of people were just coming constantly. So I do like maybe 3 sessions a day, and you know, like first thing, you know, like 10 o'clock in the morning, someone's like, right, I'm going to make a banger. It's like, okay, right, let's go. Like 10 o'clock, let me have a cup of tea first. Yeah. And then it's right, okay, let's hear what you got then. And it's like, right, okay, wicked, this is going to be, this is going to be a banger. So it was, you know, you get fatigue, and I'm paying for it now. I've got tinnitus in both ears. It's livable. It's not like debilitating, but I paid for it, like with those big tannoys, like, and having it up because, you know, you want to hear it. You know, you've got to feel it. We had these huge, great big tannoys, and then a little pair of Yamaha NS10s, which you're not going to get any vibe from. But as a reference, you need to hear it like really quietly and just hear that all the tops aren't too crazy. That if you see the cone vibrating like crazy, it's like, okay, yeah, the bass is good, and just. It wasn't necessarily a formula, but you just get used to it. It becomes methodical, you know.
Right.
And sometimes it's a bit different, and sometimes it's, you know, it's you just kind of do 3 sessions, which is pretty much the same quality and the same thing that everyone's looking for.
Yeah.
So it's I hit a groove, you know. I got into a stride. And it's like, right, okay, I know. I just knew instinctually, right, okay, this is what's going to happen. This is where the track's going to go.
Yeah.
This is what you're going to want from it, and away we go.
Yeah.
And the rest of it was just the fun of doing it, you know.
Yeah, right. Nice. I remember I was working with a producer many years ago, guy called Smithmonger, and he had a studio down in Brixton, and he could play it loud but not too loud. But actually, the way that he would test his sub, he had this literally just a single. Remember those old metal Sony headphones? They were massive things, right?
Right.
But he would hold it to his cheek and he would test the vibration, and then he would go and play it out in the club and go, right. And that's
Brilliant.
how he'd measure whether he'd got the sub right, because he would just measure it on his cheek. It's just mad, the sort of techniques.
That's crazy. You just found whatever worked for you.
Exactly.
And, you know, you could see, because we were like the desk that I was using is a big. It was a 24 input into eight bus groups into a 2 stereo, so a 24/8 so you had VU monitors like all over the place. So it was one thing, like a visual thing. So you know, you could see what the VU monitor was doing, and you know, if it was redlining and like smashing up against, you know, like plus 20 dB, it was like maybe that's a little bit too loud. And then the rest of it was just. Yeah, you just crank it and just sit there and listen to it. And sometimes you'd have to stand in the other room because it was just too much, and you just have to sort of step away from it. And if it sounds good at a distance and it sounds good in the room, then it's like, okay, yeah, you nailed it.
Got it. Well, look, I want to dig back a little bit more on the Crystal front, because obviously you had a great relationship with him.
Absolutely.
And obviously tied in with that is Lucky Spin as well. So I think let's start with let's start with Drop Ecstasy, like the first release. Let's talk about that, because obviously that was like Crystal Dan's, you know, introduction to the world, and still sounds like crazy fresh and
It's
different
crazy, isn't it?
now, right? But it did really stand out from all the other tunes. So, what was that like working with Dan on that one?
That was mad because he came in, and I think I worked with one, and then there was one of the other guys, Greg, like a really good mate. That he engineered one of the sessions as well. Pardon me, and Dan was like had this whole like thing about putting a flange, phasing and all that kind of stuff. And the word itself is quite funny, a flange, all that kind of like proper schoolboy kind of humour. Let's get a bit of flange on it. It's like, yeah, go on, like, a bit more flange, yeah, a bit like this. So that was like, I think it was Drop Ecstasy on one of them. You can hear it's just kind of like this kind of stuff. And we just like mess about and just put that over the brakes or put that over something. And it really was just, just like, let's just have some fun. And like Dan, like I say, he had that kind of energy. He knew what was in his head, and just wanted to kind of, bring that out and make it real. And then let's just have some fun with it. And just so long as it had the tempo and it had the energy and it had the vibe about it, then it was like anything goes. Does this sound good? Yeah. All right. Let's go with that then. Yeah. No worries. Like, so that was great. And I mean, he always was and still always is like such a when Dan did something or still does something, he does it like 100%, man. Like he's completely in it and he totally knows what he wants and he totally knows where it's going. So it was always great to work with him and like because he's a great person, he's a great guy, he's a really great friend, a lifetime friend. And but the energy that he brought into the studio and the jokes and the laughs and that whole side of it, of the whole creative process of being, locked in a music box for 8 hours with a couple of people and just being creative and doing this kind of stuff. It was just brilliant. And we kind of really connected, my kind of my technical skills with Dan's just energy and passion and just kind of thinking about what he wanted to do and how he wanted it to sound and all those kinds of things. We really clicked, and it was a partnership that grew and grew. We made some crazy ass tunes, man. Really,
I mean, like literally genre-defying tracks.
Yeah,
I'm pretty confident in saying that one. Meditation, Walk Drive, those were just...
Yeah. When that dropped, and hearing that on a big system, just like the power that came out of when that Amen kicks in, just smashing up against the threshold on the compressor, and just the energy that came out, and it was just like, that's what I want, man. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, get it, man. I've got it.
All right. So obviously it tied in with Crystal is working and getting involved in Lucky Spin. So talk to us about Lucky Spin. How did that kind of all kick off?
Well, I mean, I was working with, because I was working with Dan, obviously, and then I think Justin, Slipmaster J, he was coming in at that time. I think he did some stuff with Greg. I think maybe he did one tune or something. He did the flip side to Drop Ecstasy, I think. And then and another mate of mine called Ollie Red Eye, and we did Burn to Spliff, and we did that single with him, and I think that was one of the early Lucky Spin releases as well. So I was kind of aware of, Justin was there and he was doing his thing, and I was super busy doing with everything else. And then Seduction said, so you know what, mate, are you going to do a tune for me or what? You're going to do a tune for Impact? And I was like, yeah, all right, yeah, okay, I'll do something. And did the Rev P thing, right? Probably the best artist name that you could ever come up with. And Justin came, and I gave it to John, and John was like, playing it around and saying, I've got this thing and everything. And Justin came up to me and said, what are you doing? Like, what do you mean? It's like, well, aren't you going to give me anything? What are you doing? Like, you're working with Seduction now. I'm like, no, man. Like, he asked me to do something, so I just gave it to him. He's like, no, the next thing, if you do something, like, come see me and give it to me. I was like, well, okay. And I literally didn't have the time to do any of my own stuff. I was just working constantly so much. and getting all these ideas and working with all these like amazing producers and listening to all this incredible music that was just flowing, and all the time just just getting all these samples and building up my sample library and knowing what the breaks were, because I didn't have time to go out, like I said. Not until it was going out at Speed at a milk bar that I was really had the time, or to go out and do those kinds of things. So I was relying on everything that the energy and the vibes and everything that the people were coming in and telling me about what these nights were like and what the music was like and how like incredible it was, and this whole scene that was evolving, and that. A lot of the artists that were coming in were releasing stuff on Justin's label, and then Seduction brought rap in. I ended up working. I think I did a mix down for rap, one of rap's first tunes, and we hit it off really well. And that's another kind of really good connection, a really good partnership that we had with that. So it slowly began to evolve, and slowly the me with the artists that were coming in and seeing me, and then Justin with, he understood and knew what was going on. So it's like, okay, go and see Pete, go and take it over to Pete, and we'll sort it out. And that's how it kind of just evolved. It was just one of those natural kind of things that happened, So, it was a really good partnership, really great. Man.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Music, like really awesome music.
And of course, I want to talk about DJ Trace as well, because obviously, worked with him back in the day. Like, again, like how did that kind of all kick off, and what was the story there?
I can't remember like when I met Trace. I think because this was before the record store. Lucky Spin had moved next door to Monroe, and they were still down at section. Was it section 5? They were
Kings Road, wasn't it?
In Kings Road, they were down in the basement at Kings Road, and then they moved out and it became Section 5 after that. So they were down there, and so I think Trace was kind of hanging out around there, and he must have come to the studio at some point. And I'm trying to think the first thing that we did together. I can't remember. I think, but I started to see him a lot more when they moved the whole thing next door to the studio, of course. And this is kind of moving into more sort of mid-90s. And I can't remember exactly the first thing that we worked on, the kind of the discography of everything, the chronology of what was the first and all that kind of stuff. But he was another guy, and still is obviously another guy that was very, he knew, and that's a real key to as a production skill, as a writer, is you hear the music. You don't come in with this vague kind of idea. Maybe I want to make something. No, you can't. And especially when you're paying money for the time. Studio costs money, so you got to come in. You got to know what you're doing. You got to be prepared. You got to have this clear vision of where you want to go. And I remember some of these tracks that we made with Trace, especially the By Any Means Necessary, was just like an awesome session, and like what a tune, and the Babylon remix as well was just banging it, man. It's like, and that track in itself, right. to like that just all by itself, no other remix is just like is a golden classic, genre defining kind of piece of music. That Babylon track, Splash, was insane, and then they did loads of remix of it. And then when he came in and we did that one, that was like, again, it was like, okay, he didn't really say, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do it, let's make it sound. It's like, okay, we're going to do remix, we're going to remix this. Here are the parts. All right, let's get going. So, because I was there on I had the 1040 there, the sampler here, and everything there, and so it was mainly kind of down to me to just kind of get something going. All right, let's get a break going. Let's get something happening. It was never like, right, okay, there's the sampler, there's the keyboard, right, off you go. I was always kind of like, right, okay, let's try this. What do you think about this? And all right, yeah, let's hear this sound. And I play a chord and maybe, double up on something and be like, all right, yeah, that's cool. Let's go with that. Let's go with that. And then, all right, let's try this and let's do this. And like, yeah, let's try a few more edits on the break and let's just like stretch that out. Let's give 32 bars on this one or whatever. And it was just vibes. There was never, it was all just like, just pure vibes when we did all of those tunes. And, it was Duncan, it was Tracy, all the guys that came in, they brought their ideas and they brought the samples, they brought all that in there. And it was just my knowing and hearing the samples going, right, okay, I know where this tune is going. And then the melody or the sound, the track, the idea of the track that was maybe not sort of fully formed yet, but they knew the direction it wanted to go in. And you just, I remember listening to Quincy Jones' documentary that was on Netflix or whenever it was a few years back, and just how his whole process of working like with like some like legend people. This guy was insane, the amount of music that he was making and how successful he was at making. So whatever Quincy Jones was saying, you were like, right, okay, yeah, what did you say? Like, what did you do that? Okay, right, yeah. And I remember that he said, that you follow the music. You always follow the music. You don't like once you put something together, it has a kind of like a life of its own. The melodies work together, across a period of time, and it creates an energy, a vibe that you connect with. You know what it's like. And also, we also know what it's like when it starts to go wrong. When you start thinking, I don't want it to sound like that. I want it to sound a bit like this, and you start changing it. And then before you know it, you're sitting there, and it's like it's another one of those tunes that never quite gets finished. Or maybe you get like you're really focused, and you can change it into something else. And great, brilliant. But I found more often than not that listening to the melodies and listening how it all goes, and just kind of going right, yeah. And you just kind of you guide it and you kind of form it and shape it, but don't try and change its direction. You just kind of let it go. And we were really, I wouldn't say lucky, definitely not lucky, but maybe not even fortunate, because like it was all here.
Right. You were naturally in tune with it, right?
Yeah, you were just like, it was just vibes. And again, I was thinking, you hear a lot of this old sort of classical music, and the classical music was like, there was no technology, there was nothing, it was just pen and paper, but yet these incredible composers, and that they literally heard all this stuff in their mind, and the various different parts of the orchestra, what it was going to do, and they'd write it all down, and this incredible sort of sounds would come out. And it was obviously, it wasn't Mozart or Beethoven what we were making. It was something very different. You know what I mean? It still had the energy, it still had the flow, and it still had the vibe, and that's what it was all about. It was like putting things together, and this is working, right? Let's go with that, and let's just gently stretch this out, and then that's it. And like the case in point really was like the like with Trace, the things Miles High and After Hours is two so simple tunes that it's one loop or maybe two beats, a B line, a melodic kind of Rhodes, and a little, it's just a pure melody and a little high string, and that's it for like 7 minutes. Boom.
Yeah.
And it's a killer tune.
It's crazy.
It just happens, and there you go.
Have you heard so that's just been repressed or been released through Lee, Deep Jungle. And he sent it to me, and there was the 9 Windows remix. And I thought, who's that I played? I was like, wow, that sounds great. And I looked it up. I was like, holy shit, that's Trace and Kid Drama. Like, how amazing is that he's back on it? I've got a question for you. This might be a bit of a tricky one to answer, because it's a bit like choosing your favourite child. But Nick Hazeldine says, please can you ask Pete what tracks he worked on back in the golden era that he's most proud of, and why?
God. Like if we're talking golden era, so we're talking like kind of mid-90s, 94, 96, between that was the real golden, for me anyway, that was of the atmospheric and the whole kind of thing. I don't know. It's like, I mean, I think that some of the stuff that I was doing with Dan, it's impossible. So I can never say
Yeah,
this tune was like,
yeah,
bam, that was it. Because for me, they all worked in so many different ways. I think the track, one of my favorite tracks that I did with Dan was Deep Space.
nice.
That just had some raw energy. That one break, just the edits that we put on there, and then the breakdown was just like wow. And that was the thing that I loved about all those tunes, is that I could get proper creative and really just deep. And I love that of having the two completely different energy kind of levels of the breaks and the B line, and it was all rolling, and then suddenly you pull it all out, and then it's just there's the strings, and there's just this openness, and it's like, oh man, that was insane. That was just so cool. So I think Deep Space was a real killer for me. I think when I first heard Sharice's track, what was the big one that she boom 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 boom, the really big one. God, I can't remember anything.
I'm hearing it, but words are
Yeah.
failing me. Someone help me out
Yeah.
in the comments.
Yeah, like somebody. What was that track that Rap did? That was a really big one.
Oh, Spiritual
Engineers
Aura.
Without Fear, Spiritual Aura.
Yeah,
I remember mixing that down, and I was like, man, this is just gonna blow up. This is just absolutely crazy. That was a real, that was brilliant. And I think a couple of the Focus ones as well. Oh God, the one that was that I just put out in the chat. I'm useless, my memory, mate.
He's just re-released. He's just repressed one of them, isn't he?
He said the Suicide one, yeah, Get a Bearing. And some of those early tracks, like with Paul, like when you listen to like Vexed and I Want and Get a Bearing and all those things he had on Suicide, that was the energy that he was coming in. And it was just raw. It was just, the breaks weren't really particularly refined. It was just, you know, like all this crazy, and like, I was like, damn, man, this is madness. And I remember that one track, I can't remember what it is, but it's the one where it's like halfway down it goes into the breakdown where there's this synth part. We had this synth that used to sit in the corner, and like it was a mono synth. And I was like, and we were kind of, I remember we were kind of struggling to think of like, let's just get something. And he said, all right, let's plug in this synth, man. Let's see what's going on here. And I found, you know, like a growly sound, and it's like, okay, what if I like just mess around with some of the buttons? And I was like doing the LFO, so you got that. I was like, right, stop.
That sounds good.
Just like I recorded it into the sampler, like live, just like, okay, right. Paul was like, all right, go, and I just got crazy on it. And
nice.
That was mental. And yeah, and then Paul, we kind of refined the sound a little bit as we got into the kind of DJ things and got a bit more atmospheric and everything, and it still had the energy and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, he's just re-released that. And luckily, I had 4 of his tracks on DAT, because he, like, unfortunately, his place got broken into years ago, and somebody nicked like everything. He got cleaned out. Yeah, so he had like loads of sample CDs, loads of DATs, loads of discs. Everything was just like gone. So yeah, so he hit me up a little while back, and the guy that runs the label that has done the repress said, listen, is there any way, have you got anything? And I was like, yeah, man, yeah. So I sent that over to him. So that's really great to see that over, because those tunes are like, and when I listen to them, I'm just like man, they're so
I can see that
mad.
sparkles coming in your eye there, Pete.
Yeah, man, it was brilliant, and that was just like, man, we just smashed that in one day, you know, like come in with a, like, put that in there, boom, 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 let's get crazy, done, finished, like put it on that, done. And a lot of those times, because they did, you know, people just wanted, like, in the moment. It's, you know, because there was no recall on the desk. It's not like it is now where you do everything in the machine. Like Cubase was just purely MIDI, you know. So that was the main reason that I put everything at 0 and tried to balance and have everything as good as it could be, because I knew that if it didn't work by the end of it and they wanted to come back in and we had to like set the whole thing up again, that was just going to be long. And so, you know, we had to, on a time thing, maybe 6 or 8 hours, maybe 10 hours, depending on who it was. So it was like start to finish, make the tune, finish it all off. If there's any vocals or something like that, do it, dat it, up to music house, done, finished. Like
easy. So
yeah, man.
So Pete, you sound like a guy that is, because I speak to a variety of people, and some people are like, oh, I had so many DATs back in the day, I'd just write ABC or just scribble on them and just throw them in a box, and I've just ended up with, they've either got a box of just miscellaneous God knows what, or they've got no DATs. But you sound like you've got a good little catalogue. What are you hiding there, Pete? What else have you got in that little DAT collection?
Well, for a long time I didn't have any. I had some stuff, but a lot of the stuff that I had, all the original stuff, like is for me is gone. It's like it's like it just doesn't exist anymore. Like Justin, there's a sort of story there that Justin had the big flight case, silver flight case, that had all the DATs, had loads of DATs from all kinds of people, from me, from Duncan, from Focus, from Orca, from everybody that put out. He had all the DATs in it. And I didn't have a lot of my stuff, like the RevP thing. I haven't got that. I haven't got digital of that. I haven't got the Voyager Part 1, the Eastern Promise, all that kind of thing. I think I've got Eastern Promise, but I don't have the other tune with the dun 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 with the piano, with the big kind of piano thing. I haven't got that anymore. I don't know where that is. So there is some stuff that's missing. And there was a sort of backstory there that pre-COVID, I was talking to Trace, and we were kind of like having this sort of conversation about what's going on with DJ, what's happening with Justin, and all this kind of stuff. And there was maybe some talk about doing some re-releases, some represses, and going back into the catalogue, and you know, and kind of maybe relaunching the thing, because you know Justin and Sasha kind of went and did their own thing, and that's cool. But we still had this whole kind of heritage of the label and all this music, but wasn't really sure where everything was. And I was kind of talking to Justin, and Trace was talking to Justin, and Justin was kind of in it, but not really in it. Had this whole kind of business thing that he was doing over in America and that, and was kind of in it. And you know, obviously we wanted to get Dan involved. It was a big thing, and get a lot of the original people involved and all that kind of stuff. And it never quite happened for various different reasons. And in the end, I managed to get back a few of my DATs, but there was one DAT, right, that had some, I think it had a few of my bits. It had that Voyager, Eastern Promise, and those kinds of things. I was written on in there, and I remember like Lee had it, Lee Deep Jungle. And that's another little story. I'll tell you about that in a minute. But I went over to his place, and we heard all these kinds of things, and I was like, and I found this DAT, and I was like, mate, that is it. I can repress this. And then it's got like an early mix that Justin has done, like across the whole DAT, like from start to finish. Of like, I think from like the Promised Land version 2 or something like that. He was just messing around with some beats, and I was like, that it was just so gone, completely gone.
Gutted.
Yeah, really gutted, man. And I tell you what is quite funny is that I was just over back in London over the weekend, and I was over at my sister's, and I managed to salvage a lot of bits and pieces from my mum's old house before she moved out. Anyway, I had a bunch of cassettes, and I found, you know, because I get hit up, you know, every now and again. Oh, mate, you know, if you've got anything unreleased, or you know, any old things you want to put out, like give me a shout. I'd really love to put it out for you. And I was like, mate, I've got nothing. I've like really, the only thing we can do is maybe, you know, because I've got mint copies, you know, of either the TPs or the, you know, the mint copies of the finished copies of the vinyl, that maybe could do like you know, repress it off a vinyl or something like that. And I found, like, I just like dug out a cassette, and I bought like a dodgy old Sony Walkman, like from the 80s, out of
classic
computer exchange. Right, brought it home, hooked it into the system, and I put the cassette on, and I'm like, shit, right, what's this? Like, and it's got this track, and it's playing. I'm like, like, what? I don't even remember making this thing, man. Like, and there's about three or four tunes on there that never went anywhere. You know, they just kind of, I just made them. I was like, okay. And it was all, to be honest, a lot of it was about that early sort of noughties time when a lot of the atmospheric stuff, you know, had gone out of popularity, and everyone was like, the scene had kind of turned it, and it had gone very sort of tech steppy and a bit gnarly and a bit darker. That I was kind of trying to make stuff that was maybe a little bit more in that sort of vein that didn't quite hit the mark. So some of it was unreleased for a very good reason, because it's a bit shit. But there's some other stuff on there that is like, okay, yeah, it could do, yeah, maybe it'll stand up. I don't know. So we'll see. So there might be something, but I don't think there's going to be like this like amazing thing that's going to come out that's like, Jesus, wow. No, unfortunately not. No. I'm afraid, yeah.
No worries, mate. All right, well, listen, I really want to kind of dig in a little bit into that kind of 94, 96 era. But just before then, I'd love to get your thoughts. Obviously, you're around sort of 92, 93, you know, you're talking to a lot of people. There's a lot of people coming in and out of the studios, you know, as kind of hardcore starts branching off and jungle starts, you know, finding its own feet. What's the kind of vibe going on? Like, you know, what are you thinking? What's the kind of sort of vibe that you're involved in at that kind of particular time?
Right. I mean, that was an interesting time, because I was still working with John, because he was sending all of his impact artists were coming in and doing the final mix downs, because John at that time had a pretty decent studio at home. So obviously to save on your expenses and everything, you just go around and chill out over at John's and get all your samples, put the whole thing together, and you can leave it, come back, you know, a couple of days later, and it would be there. So you just come and do the final mix down. And so all of that stuff was, and some of that impact stuff as well was kind of evolving. It wasn't what you would call hardcore, I don't think. I mean, for me, hardcore as a kind of, as a sound, always had that, you know, you had the 4 to the floor kind of kick. The tempo was quite, you know, was down a bit. It certainly wasn't, at those days, we weren't going really much above. We certainly, like 160 was like, what are you doing? Like, that's crazy speed. Like 160, no one can dance to 160.
Now we get
it. So now it's like 180, it's like, it's a bit slow. But then, so there was still some, you know, stab patterns, and the kind of funky drummer break was still being like really just caned, and the general kind of production styles and the direction of where the tune was going, there was still that. And I've still got a couple of old tunes that I did manage to find that from some old people that I've still got a copy of, and I listen back to them and I'm like, okay, yeah, it was interesting, because you could start to the change in the tempo kind of was going up. The break work, the edits in the breaks were starting to change. More 808s were coming in, so it was a bit more punctuated rather than just, you know, that kind of just straight sine wave bass line, which was very, you know, which you heard in a lot of those kind of hardcore tunes. It was becoming a little bit more sort of rhythmical and a little bit more kind of melodic, and the stabs weren't being quite so prominent in the actual, that defined the tune. You know, if you had those kind of, those stabs, those, you know, the you had all that kind of stuff. That's a hardcore tune, you know.
Yeah.
And that started to sort of fall away a little bit with maybe some of the stuff that the artists that I was getting from John's label, Impact, and some of the other artists and people that I was working with that were kind of just okay, let's just kind of, you know, let's not put the kick on there anymore. I don't want that kick drum on there. And the tempos were just starting to increase, and they just seemed to be like, okay, this is an interesting kind of area that we've not really explored yet, of being more okay, a little bit more like the atmospheric side of things, which was always in those hardcore tunes. You know, you had the breakdown, you know, with the smurfed up vocal and the string sample and all that kind of stuff. So there was that was still there. So it was like, I was really into that. So it's like, okay, let's kind of build on this. How about we kind of make that a little bit more of the important part of the tune, rather than just in a breakdown. You know, let's have a really nice intro like that, and then kind of it can kind of go up from that, and people are like, yeah, let's kind of roll with that. So it kind of morphed and gradually sort of, just not adapted. It didn't adapt to anything, but it just morphed into something else. And the scene was still, the hardcore thing was still really strong, and John was still, really, gigging all over the place, and like still, super popular. And then, there had, I guess, I hate to define things and pigeonhole things, but the more kind of that staccato kind of sound with the more staccato bass line, which obviously comes from the sort of dub influences and that whole kind of different style of music, was more kind of about the breaks and about the beats and the B line that was starting to bounce a little bit more. And some of those other sort of sounds started to come into it, and it just started to go off in and just take on a life of its own. And some people were like really interested in, okay, let's go with that. Other people were like, no, like I'm happy with doing what I'm doing. And like, great, okay, no problem. So it was interesting because I ended up for a period, I had like first session in the afternoon would be, someone wanted to come in and put like a hardcore tune together and fall on the floor with the funky drummer beat, and stabs and everything. And then after that, someone would come in and go, right, no, I want to use the Soul Pride break. I want to kind of, cut all that up, put those things in, and boom, 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 and leave a break, boom, 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 boom. And it was the space, that created something, and it kind of pulled you into it a little bit more. And it's like, it was that whole kind of saying that, that funk isn't what you play, it's what you don't play. It's the gap in the music. It's that thing that lets it breathe, that pulls you into it and makes you dance. And and I guess that was driven by the dance floor. People on the dance floor were starting to kind of appreciate and dance to the music maybe in a slightly different way than the guys that were going to more kind of rave, kind of happy hardcore things, I guess. I mean, I missed all that stuff, man. All those 20,000 people in a field, like, I never got to see any of that, man. I was so gutted.
But you
gutted.
provided the soundtrack for it, so you were there.
So
you were there in spirit, mate, for sure.
In spirit, I was there, yeah, man. Yeah. But I miss those days, man. I wish I'd have gone to at least one, like 20 or so people, in your mate's car, driving down the M1 somewhere, a service station, pick up a phone call. Yeah, right, let's go there. And go to these old aircraft hangars or something like that, and just the whole, the whole energy, the vibe that everybody was on at that time. It must have been just absolutely incredible, and I'm really gutted. I missed that side of it, but I was super busy in the studio putting it all together.
Mate, you were getting smashed up on nutriments and keeping nice and warm in there.
Nutriments, that was me, man. Yeah.
Nice. All right, so let's move forward a little bit. So, obviously, come '94, Jungle has found its own place. It's got its own nights, its own labels, its own superstars. There's a whole kind of scene that has evolved there. Talk to me about how you're kind of thinking and you're kind of perceiving that scene, because obviously even then there was kind of the sort of a little bit sort of slightly hardcore, like Omni Trio. It was very musical in what they were doing. There was obviously the very kind of reggae, very heavy influence, Jungle as well. And then obviously you had the likes of Good Looking and Bookham that was kind of pushing, that more atmospherical kind of sound of it. What are you thinking in '94 about what's going on then?
It was just. It was such an incredible time because things were evolving and changing, literally week by week, and it was such an experimental time because you were very, very limited with the technology that you had. Nobody had, you didn't have a PC that you could have, 100 different plugins and this and that and multi effects, this, that, and the other, and like the choices were very limited. So, there was more about experimenting and being very open to doing different things, and again it was very driven by the energy of the track and what the track was actually doing to you and where you wanted it to go. So I just remember it being very open and very honest, and very, just very. I don't know. I don't want to get all kind of like ethereal and esoteric on the whole kind of thing, because I think we were all on the same page. You know what I mean? We had a whole bunch of people that were making music, that were going out, playing it, seeing everybody like lose their shit to their music, and go, right there, let's do some of that. And it wasn't about the money. People, I honestly don't believe that it was never about the money. It was never about, oh, I want to sell this many units, I want to do this, I want to do that. And of course there was a business side to it, of course there was. But as artists, you know what we're like. We're very kind of, you know, touchy-feely and very like spiritually and emotionally driven. So, you know, when you get that hit, you know, and I guess like as a DJ, if you're standing there and you're playing your music, AWOL or you know, one of these huge, great big, you know, outdoor raves or something, and you're seeing people just lose their shit to your music. It's like, yeah, there is literally no limits. There was nothing. It's like, oh no, you can't really do that. No, that's not the way. It's like, no, let's try that. Let's give that a go. So, you know, weird samples, stuff that wasn't in time, stuff that was just reversed. You know, so you go like start taking stuff off of VHS, off of cassettes, off of weird kind of jazz tracks, and you know, I've forgotten how many like hardcore remixes I did with the girl from Ipanema, like vocal on there, man. And there was about 3 or 4 of them, and every one of them was like, oh, this is like, oh, I was like, man, yeah, okay, maybe this is a little bit played out, but it was really free. It was really, and I really felt that this is our kind of generation, our times, kind of sort of punk, new wave kind of thing. You know, it's like we owned it. It was that whole kind of, again, that whole kind of ethos. It wasn't, you didn't need to go and get a label deal with Sony or EMI or whatever. You know, you came, you worked in the studio, you worked at your mate's house, you did that, you went down Music House or wherever it was, you went and got your dubs cut. You saw everybody was there, everybody was totally approachable, everyone was there, everyone was like, yeah. What you got? If it was good music, you'd be like, yeah, I'll take it, that man, yeah. And you know, someone would take it, they would release it, great, okay, do a next one, you know, next week, yeah, I've got a new one for you, man. It's like, so it was non-stop, and it was all done by just regular, normal people, you know, that loved the scene, that felt a part of, you know, a community of us, you know. And I know that this happened, it wasn't just a London thing. It was happening, obviously, it was happening down in Bristol, it was happening up in Manchester, it was happening in Liverpool, it was happening all over the place, you know, to varying different degrees, you know, that everybody had kind of caught onto this vibe that was like, that belonged to us. It was like, we didn't, you know, it wasn't imported, it wasn't from America. America was still, you know, like had no idea what we were up to, like absolutely no idea. And a few people did. Yeah. But by and large, America was just like, no, they were doing their thing. It was still house music, and it was still all that kind of stuff. And that was great, man. Like, that was awesome.
I suppose the key thing there for me was that, you know, it opened up that creative possibility for everyone. You know, you didn't have to have thousands of pounds to pay money to go in a studio. It really facilitated that kind of that DIY approach, right? You know, totally. You actually could get involved, and all of a sudden it wasn't that difficult to start a record label. It didn't need an office with 60 people in it. You know, the self-made person could quite easily achieve it.
Yeah, you just needed a little bit of money just to get the thing going. You still had, you know, there were lots of pressing plants around. You had a mate that maybe was a graph artist that could do a bit of artwork for you, or even like whatever. You had a stamp, and you just, you know, your girlfriend and your mates would sit around, you know, and just like, and stamp up, like literally hand stamp, you know, 1,000 records or something, and then, you know, put it in the back of the motor and drive around the various record shops. And I know for a fact that that's like a couple of guys like Ollie, that's how Ollie used to do his thing. And I'm pretty sure that the vast majority of people started like that. You got out, you put the graft in, you put the records in the back of the van or the back of the car, and you went black market, you went, you know, all the different record shops that used to be around London, and you went and sold the boxes here, there, and everywhere, and made your money, and then you put that back into the next release, or you paid and went in the studio and did something else, and that was it. And like you didn't need any of the big labels. You didn't need to promote it because it was all self-promoting, and you had a few of the little mags and fanzine things that grew up. You remember Knowledge Mag?
Yeah,
It's a little little A5 thing. That was a real supporter. I remember seeing that all the time, and they was like interviewing and top 5, top 10 from this one and this one and whatever. And that was a real kind of. It was all homegrown. It all naturally came through. There was no plan. There was no plan for like global world domination. No, it just happened. It came from people like you and me and our peers and all the people that we came up together with that just were in the right place at the right time, and we just caught the vibe, and we caught the the energy. And at that time, through the 90s, early 90s and everything that come through the 80s, and the whole bullshit thing with Thatcher and all the kind of political nonsense that was going on over there, that we took control back of, right, truly, this is our music. We're going to say what it's going to sound like. We don't give a shit whether you like it or not, because we're just going to do it, and we're going to do our own parties, and we're going to do this, and we sell our records, and we make our music, and that's it. And it wasn't, like I say, it wasn't, you think like that, but like when you come back to it, it's like, yeah, okay, we were just doing our thing, man. We didn't give a crap, man.
Yeah.
And it just got, and here we are.
Right. You know what I mean? Three decades plus later.
Yeah, man. Yeah. And it truly was. I think it was the last real kind of genre that came out, I think, from that decade. That when you kind of go back, even you kind of like the 80s of synthwave and all that kind of stuff, and the big stadium bands that came through, and then head back into the 70s of rock and prog rock and early electro kind of stuff. And of course, you had all the hip hop stuff was all coming through then as well. And then even go back further. So every decade had its own kind of era-defining kind of sound and attitude and kind of fashion and just everything. And I think that was the last big one. You know what I mean? That has gone on. This lasted this long. Obviously we had kind of sort of garage and dubstep that were again were sort of predominantly sort of UK homegrown, but none of those have seen that longevity that kind of jungle, drum and bass and hardcore has seen. No, right? Absolutely. It's still as vibrant and as creative and as experimental and forward thinking and as good-hearted. Do you know what I mean? It all comes from a good place, man. There's so much love, there's so much respect, and there's so much, kind of, honesty in what gets made, and that's beautiful. And I'm not saying that that's a unique thing just for drum and bass and jungle and hardcore, whatever. I think all music kind of has that own kind of, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
and that's it's honest. It's brutally honest, and that's why I love it, man. I really do.
Yeah, for sure. And this kind of sort of, I keep saying new wave, but actually it's not really new anymore. But the last sort of 3, 4, 5, 6+ years, have seen this kind of new resurgence in kind of sort of hardcore and jungle around sort of 130 to 160, and people like Deep Jungle who have been doing represses but also kind of new stuff in that style. And I could list literally tens and tens and tens of other labels and artists and DJs that are doing it as well. The likes of kind of Pete Cannon and Reaper and Good to Go, etc., that are and the real important thing of that is there's such a phenomenal amount of respect for the 90s,
absolutely.
So much so that no one's copying it. That's the key thing, right? There's no point replicating it. Actually, they're being inspired by it. Adding their own twist to it and pushing it forward. So it's really nice to see that. I know that jungle on a higher tempo of sort of 174. I mean, I was putting out jungle stuff with, people like Mr. Williams and Top Cat and whatnot, probably 11, 12 years ago, all around the 170. And that was definitely like kind of taking that 94 era up to that drum and bass tempo. But what's happening over this last kind of, 5 or so years is that real authenticity of that raw 90s sound, but making it sound like it has been made today. And look, I want to talk to you about what's happening now with you, because obviously the Voyager story is not done by any shape or means. But before we do, I do just want to dip into the early 2000s for an act called Breakneck.
Yeah.
Now, my little mind nearly popped because I was involved, and this is how Pete and I met, was through the breakbeat scene, and a mutual friend of ours, Rennie Pilgrim, who actually was part of Rhythm Section alongside LSD, Nick and Rich, and he'd started a label called TCR, and TCR were one of the, if not the biggest breakbeat label in that whole scene. And I remember getting this, I can't remember what the name, was it Chinese Burn? I can't remember the name of the first release, but
Chinese Burn, yeah.
Yeah, and I got this, and I said to Rennie, I said, who the fuck's this? He goes, oh, it's a guy called Vlad and DJ Tamsin. Do you remember Pete Parsons? And I was like, look, I saw everything, and I've got to say a big shout out to Vlad as well. I saw Vlad in the chat, and I've got a big shout out to Vlad because I made my first record with two mates in around '95, but we did that whole self-releasing. We printed up 1,000 white labels, we stamped every single one. We drove around to all the shops, never went back to collect any money. We just thought, right, that was it was done. And Vlad played it in, I think it was in 2000. And it was a night I'd put on with Ian Davey. And I was at the bar chatting away. And I was like, I recognise that. Because obviously we'd made it 5 years ago. Yeah, 5 years before. So big ups, Vlad. So anyway, I got introduced to Breakneck. And you guys, again, it is that classic kind of Pete Voyager sound. Unmistakable. There's that rawness, there's that energy, there's that low end, there's everything that kind of comprises it, and it really stood out to a lot of the other stuff that was being made. So I just want to rewind a bit, like how did that kind of trio come together?
I kind of well, at that time I was Tamsin and I were together and been together for quite a while, since sort of 96, 97, and she was playing at this internet radio station called oh god, like Vlad, like put the radio station in a minute. I can't remember what it's called.
Breaks FM?
No, it wasn't Breaks. It was before Breaks FM. Interface. It was
called
Interface.
Okay, yeah.
Interface, yeah. So she was doing some DJing over Interface, and Vlad at that time was kind of working over there, and so they kind of were chatting and were talking about music and all that kind of stuff. And it just they just said, okay, well, you should come over. We've got a studio over there, and Peter's over there, and we should make some music. And at that time, I think Vlad was he was DJing. He'd been DJing for quite some time, and he had a night that he was putting on. I think over near where Fabric used to be, over Smithfield or something like that. The night was called Breakneck. And I'm not sure how long that had been going for. And he came over, and at that time, I decided to sort of step away from drum and bass a little bit. I kind of, I got burnt out a bit by just the incessant, constant. It really was like literally like 2-3 sessions a week, like a day, sorry, like 5 days a week. I needed some, to just kind of step off a bit. And by that time, I'd signed the deal with R&S, and I'd had the Future Retro album out, and I'd kind of made some decisions about what I was doing as far as work and all those kinds of things. And I kind of find myself at like a bit of a crossroads, and the scene had changed and had become quite anti the whole sort of atmospheric thing. The media had become very interested in it, and it was being, you could hear it on a commercial, or you could hear it as a background piece of music on a cookery program. And so the scene was like, okay, fuck that. Like, no, let's get it nasty and gnarly and horrible. And I couldn't connect with it. So I was just kind of thinking, okay, I was looking for something to do, and I was still working with Trace, and we were doing some bits and pieces back in the studio that I had at home, and that was I was like doing a couple of things with Fabio as well. Those were the two things that I did with Fabio around about that time, and Trace left. He had a piece of equipment. He bought some stuff, and he'd left one of them in the studio. God, I can't remember. It was a big, like 3 or 2U kind of synth. It was blue, and it was really kind of like brand new thing at that time. It had some crazy sounds. And Townsend and brought Vlad round, and they said, "We want to make some things. We want to do, this kind of new breaks thing or this breakbeat thing, but it's really slow, or it's much slower than drum and bass and jungle and that." Let's do something. Let's just get something together. I was like, oh, okay. So we kind of like messed about in the studio, and we got this Chinese burn thing going. And that time I had the Trinity, which is this thing sitting over here that I managed to bring over, and that's got it's got this kind of ribbon thing. So you can, when you're playing the bass line, you can really mess with the filter and really kind of play with the filter. And I think that's where the bass line from Chinese burn came.
Yeah.
And when I was kind of on my own, I made this track called, it was one of the other tracks on that release, Arson Gear.
Yeah.
And this is, and it was mastered from cassette. And this is the cassette, because I didn't put it, because I made the tune, with this synth from the Trace had left. And then he came back and he's like, yo, I need to take my stuff back. And I was like, yeah, of course. So I literally made this track in one go, just experimented, put some breaks in there, had this kind of sort of monotonous sort of beeline thing, and really slowed down, had the Apache break in there and a couple other bits and pieces. And for me, it was just like, okay, I'm just going to approach this in the same way that I do with jungle, and just get a vibe and catch a thing, but like pull the tempo right down. And I just banged it on cassette, and then we made these other things, and then the guys knew, I think Vlad knew Rennie. I can't remember how the connection came about with Ren, but they played it to him, and he was like, yeah, okay, right, if you could give me the DAT for this one. I was like, I haven't got a DAT, man. It's like, it is. It's on cassette. And he's like, oh, right, okay, right, give me the cassette, I'll make a copy of it, and then send it over to Metropolis and see what we could do with it. And that's the thing that you hear on the record.
I'm gonna have to dig that out, because I used to play both sides. Like, that was one of those records you could just pull it out and go, that side.
Yeah, and so that's a cassette master right there. So we kind of had this, we had this thing. So I was like, again, I was going out to a few things, and I was listening to the radio show and listening to what was going on over there. And Townsend was still playing her drum and bass. She had a drum and bass show, but then there were other DJs and stuff that were starting to play this kind of new breaks thing. And I was like, okay, this is kind of interesting. I kind of like this. This is a new vibe. It's a new direction. It's still organic. It's still got breaks. It's not kick snare, kick snare. It's still sample based. And for me, it was, I was always about sample based, with putting synths and keyboards and bass lines and other stuff. But essentially, the spark from the majority of the tunes that I made and the majority of the stuff that I worked on was all sample based, like it or not. But that was it, and that was the main thing. So, and because of the drum and bass thing, I was still listening to what was going on in drum and bass, and so obviously it was Townsend. Vlad brought the whole new breaks thing kind of into it, because that was what he was into, and that was what he was listening to, and the new breaks thing was kind of evolved, kind of like from the drum and bass, from house, from the garage thing. And I loved the beats and how the beats and bass line worked within the whole garage thing, that speed garage thing, all that kind of. I loved that whole scene, man. I was all over that, and I wanted to kind of introduce that with breaks, then with gnarly kind of sounds and nice big strings and breakdowns, and just kind of, okay, let's try and sort of put that together, and let's just see where we got. And yeah, we did. We had quite a few releases. I can't remember how many releases we had there on TCR, and the whole breaks thing, which is where you and I really kind of sort of met each other and hung out and had a couple of tequilas together, every now and again, And it was they were good times, man. That was fun. It was again, it was another new thing. It was something again that just kind of evolved out of a few different scenes and kind of had an identity of its own. And we just went with it. We didn't, and we could be like quite, gnarly and sort of, a bit sort of, quite aggressive with some of those sounds, but then still have the kind of house, kind of monotonous, driving kind of rhythm to it, which I was really into. So they were good times, man. It was good.
For sure, mate. Did me and many people good. And I think you're right. This is one of the things I loved about it was that it was that kind of that attitude of no rules. It's like I want to make a more funk-based breakbeat tune. I want to make a bit more of a gnarly drum and bass one, or I want a bit more of a techie one, or I just want to pop. There was lots of different flavors and elements that were kind of getting pulled. The constant was the beat. It was a breakbeat that was in there rather than a 4/4. So there was a lot of good stuff that came out of that for sure. And
definitely, loads of stuff. And like again, it was Ren made his thing. There were loads of other guys, producers, DJs that made their own labels. We ended up doing the London Bricks thing. Vlad ended up going off and doing his Sokolov Sounds thing. And there were a few festivals and stuff that we were going to that TCR were running. That had one of the tents. It was like the breakbeat tent. Glade. Did you ever go to any of the Glades? The Glade festivals out in Reading somewhere.
I played the first one. Me and Terry, when we were doing like our 7 decks and effects thing with MC Xander. It was absolutely bonkers, mate. Absolutely bonkers.
That was crazy over there, wasn't it, man? That was special. I think I went to about 3 of them or something. One was just so rained out. There's like mud, like this, and it was just crazy. But it was just, you were there, you were with your mates, you were having a laugh. And it was all part of the whole thing, and the music again just took on a life of its own. It evolved, and the whole electro influences all kind of came in there as well, and everything. It was brilliant. Like, loved it, and again, like the kind of thing. It became, for me, it started to become a little bit sort of formulaic. The beats started to, the breaks started to kind of slip away, and you kind of got into the kind of kick snare, kick snare, kick snare, kick snare. And I do remember going to a couple of nights and just hearing, just like there was nothing that really stood out. The energy of the music was pretty just sort of plateaued, and it was good and it was well produced, and it was quality, but it kind of lost something for me a little bit, and I just got a little bit okay, I kind of did my thing. I felt I did my thing with it, and was allowed to have that expressive kind of moment there of being creative and trying to put in my drum and bass things into a slightly different tempo and a different group of people. So yeah, it was good. I loved it.
Came in, caused a storm, dropped your mic, that's it.
And then just
done.
Laters. Yeah.
Well, look, I think that brings us nicely on to Voyager, and one of the things is definitely more Voyager releases coming out over the last few years, which I know everyone is very happy about. But I want to go back to the start of Voyager. Tell us about the birth of Voyager and you, and what that meant to you and how you got it started.
Well, sitting in the studio working with all these like amazing people and these like brilliant producers and visionary, literally visionary people. I was like, okay, you know what? Like, I fancy some of this. Like, I can do this. And I was just completely like locked into the whole scene. And I like in the few times where there was a bit of downtime in the studio or somebody cancelled, it was like, right, brilliant. Like I've got maybe 6 hours in the studio to do something. And I did the Rev P thing, and that was like 94. And then I didn't really do anything for a while. And then I remember there was a guy who used to come and use the studio, who bought a whole bunch of these cards, these extra ROM cards for the M1 that he was doing. I think he was doing lots of library music, music for adverts and game shows and all that kind of stuff. So he needed all this kind of preset, weird kind of stuff. And he left it, and he said, "Listen, I'll leave it in the studio so long as no one nicks it and it's there when I need it. Then help yourself." So I was like, "Okay." So and one of them was this piano one that I put in there in the M1 piano, and I was just fiddling around and playing with it, and I found that sound, that the piano sound on the Voyager track, the first one that was on Lucky Spin, that was the that one.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, this is boom, that is amazing. And I just, and I created, and I got this whole library of stuff that was either that wasn't used by anybody else, or was just stock. I had a big silver flight disk. I haven't got it here. It's at my sister's. That was rammed full of floppy disks, like 3.5-inch floppy disks, and that was the library. There was no hard disk, so the hard disk was like, it was a monster.
I think they had like 1.4 meg of storage or something, wasn't it? It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And if the floppy disk, if it didn't work, that was you. You were screwed. You couldn't do it. And we had the thing was to find a supplier. It was like, you needed your disk, like your disk guy. Like if you could supply, like a box of 100 floppy disks for like £5 or something, like he was your guy. That was your personal Jesus, that guy. Because I was eating up these floppy disks like no one's business. So I had, samples, I had, beats, I had this, I had that, I had all kinds of stuff, and loads of ideas and loads of influences and loads of all this kind of energy that I'd had from people that was like, right, okay, yeah, I wanted to kind of get into this and do this stuff for myself, rather than be a part of this whole thing as an artist, in my own kind of standing, and that's how it all began. It wasn't that I was holding anything back from anybody else. It was just that they came in with their sounds and their ideas, and it was just like, okay, well, I've kind of got where I want to go. I want to make it, bring the jungle kind of thing into it, but really go to town on the atmospheric and the strings and the vocals and the blending of the different sort of sounds and making up all these colours, and do that and really kind of go to town on that kind of thing. And so I had the two Lucky Spin things. I had the Red P first, and then the two Lucky Spin things, and I did a few remixes. I did the Midnight remix, which was really cool. That really came together really nicely. And I did a thing for Busy Bee. Was it Busy? Yeah, I think I did a thing for. Oh no, was it Joker? It was on Joker. No, who was it? I can't remember. But that was another thing that I did. I just did like a little remix, and people just say, "Listen, man, like, do you want to do a little remix on it?" I was like, "Yeah, okay. I can't tell you when I'm going to finish it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll have a crack at it. Like, just leave me the samples. I'll have a go." And yeah, there were some nice things that came out, and again with all the focus stuff. And then I just thought, and then sort of 96, 97, 96 really, and then sort of Goldie just blew up. Inner City Life. The album came out. Like he was just everywhere. Jungle was just like drum and bass was just everywhere. Everybody was getting signed up. Dan got his deal over at London. Groove got his deal over at Sony. And it's like people were just, it was just like big labels were just like snapping this stuff up. I was like, okay, well, like I want to put at least I can put an album's worth of stuff together. And in those early days working at Monroe Barnet, I'd come home at like midnight or something. Girlfriend would be fast asleep, and I'd just be totally wired and totally just like listening to the music, and there's just no way I could go. So I just needed to just chill, and just wrap a little thing up and just put a video on it. And it was either Predator or Aliens.
Two great films to relax to, right?
Really just unwind, with Aliens. Yeah. And particularly like Aliens, the second one. And I remember seeing that part at the beginning where Ripley is kind of woken up and she's sitting there, she doesn't know what the hell's going on, and has this whole conversation with the character, with Burke, about, you know, where have you been? You don't remember anything. What's going on? Like, where are you? And I just kind of like, I just thought that was a really kind of poignant, kind of sort of bit of emotion that was in there, because the film is pretty crazy and gung ho and Marines and aliens and all that kind of stuff. But that was a little part of like of humanity, that emotion. It's like, you know, after the first film of what that character or that person had been through, and then wake up and it's like 57 years later, your kid is has come and has gone and has died, and you don't know where anything is or any of that kind of stuff. And I just thought, you know what, let me take that, man. There's something interesting there that I can maybe make something out of, and just flung it together. And at that time, we was going out to I think it was still Speed around that time, before it changed into Swerve, and I was totally into the vibes that Bookham and Fabio and the other guys that were playing over there, that was dropping that whole scene, you know. And we had the Seba and Low-Tech tune, we had PFN, One and Only, we had like atmospheric tunes that were just like, oh, like they're unbelievable. And the vibe, it was such a tiny little place, and the energy that was going off in there, it was just non-stop. There was no kind of standing around clutching a beer and trying to have a conversation with someone like that. Everybody was having a dance, everybody was feeling it. And I was like, I want to make a track that Bookham or Fabio are going to play, and that it's going to drop in this environment. This is where I want to put my music right now. And I went away and put this thing together, and I found a little piano thing, had that, and like Bird Break, Cold Sweat was just the breaks that was just being dropped all the time, and that kind of rolling bass line. It's like, I knew it, I could hear it, I already knew it, and it was just like, and just put it together, and it's like, it's about 7.5 minutes or something like that, and that was the hypersleep thing, and it just sort of came from that whole, the album, the Voyager thing, the Future Retro thing, came from the experiences that I'd had before. And if anybody's made an album, that first album is something special, because it's the culmination of all the experiences that you've had before, the musical experiences, the personal experiences, the emotion, the drama, this, that, and the other. It all kind of comes out and goes into your music in that first album, which is why trying to get a second album after it, like really quickly, is an absolute disaster, unless you've really, really, like, you know, like just made loads of tracks. But for me, that was a real kind of, you know, kind of a real emotional sort of outpouring of everything that I had at that time.
I suppose also as well, like, you know, you at this point you'd invested so much time and energy into creating other people's, you know, music and being that part of it. You know, you're now being kind of self-indulgent and going, right, well, what I want to create, and there's no one else to kind of reference that off, and you know, must have been quite a weird feeling, right? Like, I don't know, what was it? How did you kind of feel that difference between the two at that time of kind of creating your own things?
I kind of like, I was really proud of what I was doing. I thought the music is completely comparable to everything else that I was doing with everybody else, and I was really chuffed, and I wasn't really slaving over it and like, I want to make it sound like this, I want to make it sound like that. I had a general idea of what I wanted to do, but you know, it was just I had the samples, I had the sounds, and so I was like, right, okay, that's going to work there, that's going to do this. And at that time, I was still, the only things that I was going out to was really was like the midweek thing with at the Milk Bar, you know, Speed, Swerve, and then obviously over at the Blue Note sessions, the Metalheads thing on a Sunday night. And then if I was going to go out at the tour and just sort of let off, I was going out to maybe to Bagley's, or definitely Bagley's. I was over at Bagley's for the whole, you know, UK Speed Garage. That whole kind of vibe was just, it had nothing to do with drum and bass. It was just pure, you know, that was the, you know, let off steam at that kind of thing. So I had all that energy going on as well. So yeah, it was. I didn't want to compete with anybody. I didn't want to sound like anybody else. I knew that I wanted the music to be, you know, it was still energy. It was still dance floor music. A lot of those tracks on that Future Retro are dance floor tunes. There's a couple of kind of downbeat things and a bit more kind of, you know, that aren't, but it was the culmination of those going out and being in that environment on the dance floor, working with those people that were bringing the dance floor into the studio. That was that album, that whole Future Retro thing. That was what all that was about, and but still being just able to just go, right, okay, I'm just going to play some nice jazzy chords and put a pad over that, and then just roll a beat over the top of that, and let's give that 6.5 minutes. There you go, done. And I was happy. Really.
Yeah.
And
And so yeah, you've had an amazing journey with Voyager, right? Obviously, coming up to, well, it'll be 30 years next year, right? So
yeah.
So what? How do you feel about Voyager right now? Because obviously we kind of had a few releases out there. What's in your mind for Voyager now?
Well, I've kind of, I'm not, I've tried and worked in various different kind of aspects of dance music, of underground dance music in various different forms, whether it was early kind of rave and hardcore into the inception of what became jungle and drum and bass and all that kind of stuff, and then some of the the house and garage stuff, the speed garage thing, and then some UK hip hop stuff as well that was kind of mixed in there as well. A few projects that I was involved in there, and then the new breaks thing, and then I kind of, and then what it's like life just starts saying, well, actually, hang on, you forgot about all this other stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
You can't, you've got to do this and you've got to do that and pay attention to your relationship and to your family and what's happening here and what's happening there and all those kinds of stuff. And I thought, okay, right, I need to just kind of take stock a little bit, and just wasn't, and obviously the amount of stuff that I was putting out that like just dropped off completely. And I made the move in 2012 to come over here to Serbia, to Belgrade, and I've been here since then. And so that threw up a lot of kind of things as well that comes to the forefront, that tends to distract you, or not distract you, but tends to become more demanding than your musicality and your expression of who you are and what you're doing through your music. You need to kind of go, right, okay, I need to get on with life, and what am I going to do, and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of did that. I made a few tunes, dotted along the way, and now I'm just I spent the last sort of year or so being thinking about music more than making music, and looking for to be re-energized, and find the spark again, to kind of really think that, I don't want to go back and just regurgitate everything that I was doing before. I don't want to be, I don't want to be in the middle. I don't want to hit the middle ground. Like, either be one way or be the other. But in the middle ground is really, really busy right now. It's really packed full of a lot of people. Like, music has become very, very accessible to a whole, bunch of people globally. And when America kind of finally woke up to the party and got involved in all that kind of stuff, which is great for the whole scene. But it means that the technology is way more accessible. It's way easier to use now with the whole AI thing coming in. It's just like, okay. So, I've spent a bit of time just thinking about, okay, well, what do I want to do? Obviously, I don't want music to be a thing that I used to do. Not at all, because it's who I am. But if I'm going to do something, I want to kind of do something that is a bit more, I don't know, just something that's going to just spark me. So I've kind of, I was listening to, I was totally into the whole sort of trip hop thing back in the 90s. And I loved that, and I did a few kind of like half tempo drum and bass things. I think on some of the Focus things, we just like, I just pitched the breakdown to half tempo. I did that, and I thought, what, I kind of like that. The break sounds different. All the vibes and the ethereal stuff is all going on, but the beat is different. and it's got that kind of, it's still got a groove, but it's got a bit more grime, and it's got a bit more dirt to it, and it's a bit more raw, you know, and it's not quite so clean and smooth and polished and, you know, kind of metric, you know what I mean? It's not very angular, it's a bit more kind of organic, and that's what I wanted to do. So I've kind of been thinking about that. I've got a project going on with a couple of guys here, bass player and a guitarist, that we've been doing some stuff. We've just been having a jam sometimes and going over and just making noise, and then thinking, right, okay, right, we've got some stuff, and I did a couple of vocal things as well, like back in the day, like just to have a mess around and just do some things. So there's maybe some vocally kind of things that I did that could work in a sort of trip hop kind of meets the kind of old school drum and bass thing that has a bit of guitar kind of thing, or something that's a bit different. So I'm kind of looking at blending and finding things that are gonna still work for me and still kind of not sound like everybody else's, but is still accessible, not just some crazy sort of experimental kind of thing, but it's still, you know, still has relevance and still has a reference to it, you know what I mean? So that's where I'm kind of looking at going, and that's where me personally as an artist, you know, that's kind of where I sort of want to go. And I'm in no, that like right now I've got no there's no timeline to it. It's like, okay, you take as long as you want, you know what I mean, and like do some stuff. And I just finished a suburban remix for Suburban Architecture, which is like, I just like literally just done that for him, which is really great. So nice. That I did. That's down at like 150, 151. So that's nice and like original tempo. I put the think break on there, pitch the think break down, and that's like, it gets really organic. It's noisy and it's clangy. It's got that tambourine in the background, and
nice.
Your bad self. You can actually hear what he's saying rather than some kind of Smurfy thing. And I was like, yeah, I kind of like this. And there's a little kind of like, it sounds like an old school ravey kind of vocal. And I was like, yeah, I can kind of roll with that. So, and I know that people are pulling the tempos down a little bit more, and also that I'm not going out raving anymore, man. I'm not, you know, I'd love to, but that part is like, that was then. And so I want to make music that is going to be relevant for me. Like I said, I don't want to go back and like make dance floor tunes, because I'm not on the dance floor, so I don't know what people are really. I can do it, but it's got like drum and bass or all dance music. But drum and bass, my frame of reference is like she's a very fickle mistress. You know, she demands attention, she demands authenticity, she demands that you pay respect and you go out and you listen to it like on those big systems with everybody else, and then you can take that and it's authentic and that kind of stuff. And that's where I'm coming from, that it's got to be authentic, it's got to be real. I don't want to pretend to do anything. I don't want to just do something for the sake of doing it. I'd rather not bother. And that's what I'm looking for, and the kind of things that I want for the label as well. There's a couple of guys that I'm like working with, like lately, the Adam Nomrev, that sent some things over, and he's got that, man. You know, he's got that kind of, his samples, it's a bit dirty, it's a bit grimy. You know, he knows the history, he knows where it's coming from. He's got a vision, he's got some emotion that he's putting in there. And so I was like, yeah, man, I'm on this. Let's work on this. Let's get these tracks ready. And so that's coming out. Literally, that's coming out next week. And then I've got another guy, Dean Solaris, who sent me some more other tracks, a similar kind of vibe. You know, like you were saying earlier, man. It's like people know the history. They know the tracks. They know that they can talk about it all day, and they know that this track by this one and this track by that one, and they reference it. But they're not copying it. They're not you know, mimicking it. That's their influence, and they're still putting their own personal thing into it. And that's the kind of vibes that I'm sort of looking for the label, and that's the thing that's kind of turning me on. That's like, okay, that's real, and I can feel your emotion in it. You know what I mean? And that's so. Yeah, so that's me right now, man. So
nice.
Yeah.
Wicked, mate. It sounds like you're on an amazing journey, and you're kind of having some self-discovery, some experimentation.
Still.
And you know, when you are making stuff for the dance floor, or you know, and you're choosing to, and you're on there, then great. But I get it, right? You know, there's nothing more authentic than making something for yourself. If people happen to like it as well, amazing.
Yeah,
But
absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, I listen to a whole bunch of podcasts, a whole bunch of people, and there's a couple of people I listen to. You know, Rick Rubin, this like
Mhm.
real like big time guy with like the big hair everywhere, big bushy beard, looks like some crazy Santa Claus guy. He's like one
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
most successful producers. He's worked with hip hop people, rock people, this, that, and the other. And he's got this whole kind of thing. He's just like, you know what? I just go in there and I say, okay, people just rely on my taste, they of how I think and what I'm doing and all that kind of stuff. And it's like. And he said, and like a lot of the time he said, listen, like never ever never make music for other people. Like forget other people. You make music for you, and when you're happy, that's good enough. And if other
Right.
people, exactly what you said, mate, if other people like it and it becomes popular, brilliant, that's good. Don't try and wonder why. Don't try and pull it apart and try and recreate it. But just like when you get in that moment, like because you're your worst your biggest critic and your biggest audience, your best audience, because
Yeah.
as you know, mate, like when you put something together and you play it and like the hairs on your arm go up and it's just like mate, like that's working right there. I don't want to know why it's working, but that's it.
Yeah.
Don't touch it.
For
Like,
me, I just start laughing. If I play a
yeah,
track, I get the thing, but
yeah,
I just start laughing. I'm like,
yeah.
this is
Isn't that
fucking
brilliant?
insane.
That's magic, man. That's proper magic. That's, you know what I mean. That when you think about what sound is and what it all is, it's just like frequencies and vibrations, and that does something like physiologically to you, man. Like
Hmm.
it affects you, and if
Hmm.
that affects other people, then you're putting good into the world, man. You're making
Yeah.
putting
Get some
positive
good
energy,
juju
good
out
vibration.
there. That's what we want.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, man. It's the juju. It's the good juju. Yeah, yeah.
Well,
So
listen, Pete, I've got to thank you so much for an amazing couple of hours, mate. I have loved
you're
every
welcome,
minute
mate.
of it and been seeing some of the comments as well. And it's been great to
Yeah,
hear
yeah,
your
yeah,
story.
yeah.
You have been and still are such an integral part of the scene, right? And
Well,
I think if you hadn't done what you did in the early 90s, I would, well, I'd love to see what it would look like now, but I don't think it would be the scene that we know and love today,
yeah,
right? So,
yeah.
thanks for that. And, mate, I can't wait to
Appreciate that,
hear
man.
what you've got coming up in the future,
Yeah,
mate. And
yeah.
some
Who
of those
knows,
new
man?
bits as well, I'll play them on the show.
Definitely, mate. I'll get those over to you. Yeah, for sure, mate. For sure.
Nice, mate. All
Absolutely.
right.
Yeah.
Just hang there for a minute, mate. I'll end it and then we'll say so. Also, just thanks to everyone for listening for the last couple of hours, for the questions, for the interactions, and all the love. Big respect. Everyone have a great week,
Yeah.
ladies
Can
and
I
gentlemen.
just before you go, mate? Can I just I just want to send out like mad love to literally to everybody. Like you say, like 30 years since then, like 34 years pretty much all together, and we're still getting hits and love and everything from people. I never meet these people, and you know what it's like, man. Like
Yeah.
and the respect and all this kind of stuff that I'm still feeling, and I know all my mates and all my peers and all this kind of stuff. We're still getting that, and it's just it's humbling, man. You know what I mean? And I'm so honoured to be a part of this thing and to have a chance to come and have a little chat with you and reminisce a little bit, mate. And
Mate,
I
it's
really
been.
appreciate that, man. And mad
Oh,
love
thank you.
to everyone. I just got to give a little shout out, big shout out. Sorry, mate, out to my
Well, no,
family, out
you
to my
go for it. You go for it,
yeah,
mate. You
yeah,
go
yeah,
for
yeah.
it.
You know what I mean? I've got to say that to my sister, to Vlad, to obviously to my girl, to even to everybody that has helped and supported me all the way through, and hopefully out into the future. And yeah, big up yourselves, man. And yeah, absolutely, mad love to everybody. Really.
Mate, well, Pete, once again, thanks very much, mate. I big
You're
respect
welcome.
for you and what you've done and what you're doing and what you're going to do. Like, I know there's
Cheers,
still
brother.
more great things to come. So just hang there for
Cheers,
a sec,
definitely.
mate. Let me get up,
All right.
guys. I will see you next Tuesday, 6 till 8. Oh my God, even I'm doing it now, getting the wrong time.